first off, what I'm reading about you and the governor and this feud, and you guys are, I guess you're going to get into a wrestling arena soon and duke it out. Is that still going on? Have y'all mended fences?
Well, I mean, look, I've said all along I don't have a problem with the governor. He seems to have a problem with the law. And when he runs afoul of the law, it's my job, like when anyone else runs afoul of the law, my job is to make sure that they abide by the law. It's a campaign promise I made to the citizens of the state of Louisiana, and several times, unfortunately, we've had to go to court in order to resolve those differences, and we've actually, in one of those cases that we won, I think the governor appealed it. I think we've got oral hearings in the First Circuit in August. I feel quite confident that we'll win, but I think that, look, I always have made a pledge to do what's best for the citizens of the state of Louisiana. In those areas where the governor and I can agree and it's best for the state, the people will see a great working relationship. And when it's not best for them, or it's contrary to the rule of law, that there's going to be some friction.
So I've got a question. It's a civics question for you. They call you the attorney general. So you have to be an attorney to have your job, right?
That's and correct.
The governor is also an attorney, but he could have been a farmer from South Louisiana, someplace or other. You don't have to be an attorney, but he is one.
That's correct.
You're head of the Department of what?
Justice.
So when the governor puts a committee together discussing justice, do you get involved on that automatically?
Well, no, because I didn't get an invite.
Seriously?
He did this, and he took the head of the Department of Justice, had a meeting concerning justice, and you don't get to play.
No, we don't. We didn't get an input. It was very disappointing. And what's interesting about that is that last year, and my background is in law enforcement, right? Mm-hmm. And so I knew a thing or two about public safety. My military time that I served, I was a military police officer. And throughout this entire criminal justice reform package that was developed last year and moved through the legislature this year, we didn't have any input until we weighed in at the legislative level. And I've been saying all along that my concern is that we're getting ready to see, unfortunately, my opinion is that we're getting ready to see a rise in violent crime such that we haven't seen since the 70s and early 80s, and it's going to be problematic. I forecasted the problem down in New Orleans actually almost a year ago, and look, we're seeing it across the entire state. And so, yes, it is disappointing when you don't get an invite because I think we do need criminal justice reform, but what we don't need to do is just open our jails and let people out of jail. Especially violent offenders and people that should be serving time, and so that was disappointing.
How aware are you of Shreveport is going through the very same thing New Orleans is? High crime numbers, the community is up in arms, people are upset. What advice would you give city leaders about how to start curbing this violence in our city?
Well, I was actually up in Shreveport several weeks ago and got to speak to the North Shreveport Business Alliance. Had a great crowd there, and we spoke about that. I mean, look, one of the things we've got to recognize is that, unfortunately, the last 8 years under the former president, we saw the rule of law basically eroded. We saw an Attorney General, Eric Holder, who said we could pick and choose what laws we follow and which ones we don't. We saw a president who believed in open borders and decided that our immigration laws didn't need to be followed. All of those things send a signal to citizens out there. And when they see people just being able to break whatever law they choose, or whether it's a particular law that the government doesn't want to enforce, they say, well, why can't I break this particular law? That breeds crime. And unfortunately, our law enforcement officers out there, great men and women who are out there putting their lives on the line every day, the environment that they're working in, especially when it comes to the national media, is depressing. And so we have to beef up our support for law enforcement. We have to go back to proactive law enforcement. We have to understand that citizens have as much of a responsibility as do law enforcement officers in the interaction between themselves. And so I think that when we do some of those simple things and we get tough on crime and smart on crime, we'll keep our community safe.
I know New Orleans is calling in for the help of state police. Should towns like Shreveport do the same?
I mean, that's a great question. You got a great sheriff out in Caddo. I think Sheriff Prater does an excellent job. The thing about crime, especially in big cities, is that it tends to be a multi-dimensional problem, right? You have to get the thugs off the street, right? You have to go in there and you have to take the bad guys off the street. And then you have to come back and you have to backfill when you take them off the street, because the next generation or the younger folks that were kind of looking up to them, you got to tell them, you got to be able to educate them and say, no, that is not the way that you should be acting. There is a better life for you ahead. And so, you see faith-based organizations do a great job in the backfilling of that as well. And, of course, the ultimate solution is getting the economy rolling, right? And it's tough right now in Louisiana because the economy is lagging. Taxes have never been higher than they've ever been. And, of course, there's plenty of that blame. We know where that goes. Mm-hmm. And they want to raise taxes again. All of those things are counterintuitive to building up good-paying jobs. And so, Aaron, it's not a difficult solution, right? It's an easy plan to lay out, but then you got to implement it and take some tough choices.
Jeff, but the legislature just recently passed this criminal justice reform, which is going to let more criminals out of jail. Are we? Well, why did we do that?
Well, and I want to tell you that's a great question, and some of the things they passed were good. They certainly, if they'd have passed the entire package, it would have been much more destructive. There's this feel-good narrative that's moving through the country that believes that that people basically should be in jail, and look, I believe that everyone, to a certain extent, not everyone, but many people, depending on the crime, deserve a second chance when it's a nonviolent offense. We've got an opioid crisis. Not only in Louisiana, but in the country as a whole. We've got to deal with that. But we're not dealing with violent criminals with a swift and firm hand. And that is, in itself, the problem. I can remember when you went back into the 70s, I was talking to somebody about this, a law enforcement officer and a prosecutor the other day. In the 70s, remember, we had a heroin problem in the 70s. And how did we deal with it? We stiffened the penalties. We said, look, even if you get caught with an ounce of heroin, you're going to jail for life, right? And over time, those stiff penalties helped us clean those particular streets off. Today we believe that there really is no such thing as life. In fact, you could go and create a violent murder, and at some point, society now believes you go through what's called criminal menopause. And they say, well, at some point in time, we're going to let you out of jail. Well, guess what? On the other side of that crime, there is a victim, right?
Sure.
And how would you feel if someone brutally murdered your sister, your mother, or a member of your family, or a very close friend in a very violent crime, and then 30 years later, you're in Walmart, you come around the aisle, and you meet him face to face? Think about that.
Yeah.
What does a father say when he lost his daughter at the hands of a very violent crime? Could have included, a rape and murder. And what is the message that it sends to the rest of society? Well, guess what? You know what? I can commit this type of crime and then just be good in jail for 40 years, and then eventually they'll let me out.
Right.
Those are the signals that we're sending as a whole through our society, and I believe that it is only adding to the amount of violent crime that is plaguing the state.
Back to the feud before we let you go. We got our last minute here. Everybody is saying the feud is really the beginning of your campaign for governor.
No, look, I've always...
I love how you said that. No.
No, look, I've always believed that I serve where I believe there's a challenge. I also serve where people, where I get a number of people say, you know what, this is something that we just need to fix in this state. When I ran for Attorney General, I can tell you, if you'd have talked to me 10 years ago and told me that I was going to be a member of Congress, I'd have told you, you're no way, you're crazy. And I did. And then certainly if you'd have said that I'd be the Attorney General, I'd have said, oh, no, there's no way. But I like the job I'm doing. I'm committed to the people of the state of Louisiana. And the things that I've gone out there and tackled have nothing to do about where I want to go next, because where I want to go next is where I want the state to go next. I want it to be a safe and prosperous state.
Steve Scalise, have you talked to him? I know y'all are buddies.
Yes, we've traded texts. I tell you what, I certainly hope you listeners out there say a quiet, remember him today in their prayers. He's fighting a tough battle. He's in and out of infections. He's been in and out of ICU. But a lot of us who are his friends have been doing our best to keep his spirits up. Good. And I think last week, in fact, Coach Ogeron of LSU's new head coach mentioned him at SEC Day, and I think that was just a wonderful day for both Louisiana and for Steve Scalise. So please keep him in your prayers.
You bet. Jeff Landry, Louisiana Attorney General, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
You bet. Take care.